Welcome to the messy middle for this week. We actually have a guest again, pretty exciting, for our, I don't know, 21, maybe 22 subscribers. I need to check.
We're north of 40 now.
Oh, we're north of 40 subscribers. And we're doing a conversation today on sort of the post-exit journey of Sylvain. And I wanted to pass it over to Frank to do a proper, quick little bio introduction, and then we'll get into the conversation as we usually do.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Really, really excited, today to get Sylvain to join us and talk about his experience of a messy middle. Sylvain, I'd love you to introduce yourself, but I'm going to give a short version of it, which is I met Sylvain back in the days when I used to have long hair, not talk to people, and do low-level kernel programming in at my school. We had a bunch of common friends. Kind of lost contact after graduating, and then we reconnected over the years. Sylvain is originally, I guess, in between the US and France. You'll tell your story, briefly, but you worked a couple of years in France, worked in the US in the energy industry and the grid, and then ended up launching your SaaS company. I met you during the ups. I met you during the downs, like the very, very down of it. And in a way, I guess generally from a business perspective, that has been a very, very happy ending. No pun intended, but I'm very curious to know what's your process right now, what you're going to work on next. And so that's it. But really, really, Sylvain is one of these hidden entrepreneurs that no one invites or talks about, but I would consider as being in the top 0.0001% in terms of success. So really, really glad, you're joining us and that, you get to share your experience.
Cool. Yeah. So it's funny you talk about that we've been meeting during some ups and downs, and I I think as there is this, and I'll go back to give a more formal, timeline of the events. But it's funny how one would not assume the downs would be after the acquisition, which, as founders and when we start business, we fantasize and we dream so much about this big exit or exit of any sorts, which, or let's call it a successful exit. And we're fantasizing about it, which is funny in this case where the downs are really after the exits more than before. And I'm French American, and even though I was born in the U.S., I'm actually I consider myself more French to some extent because I grew up in France. And eventually, sometime when I was very still in university, I started working for an American company based in Los Altos, California, in the Bay Area that did electricity markets modeling, which is a completely unknown niche. Most of the world, actually, but definitely in France. This is not a thing here, but a company had started a small business, opened a small office in France, which is funny because they opened that very small office because the son's boss had a girlfriend who was French, which is so funny how you just look back and see how little things that are completely unrelated just
Yeah, they don't teach you that in
set the
business school.
direction. No, how it sets the direction of your life. And many times, actually, a decade or two later, I was always like thinking about it, how I ended up and living in Texas. And I feel a lot of things just start by those small connection that happens that are completely random. But yeah, I started working in that energy business right when I was at university, and I was
Which
working on.
which which years were this? Sorry, I'm interrupting. Two questions.
Yeah,
Where were
yeah,
you born? Where were
yeah.
you born in the States, and which year was
Oh,
this? So we can just accurately
yeah,
understand the timeline.
yeah. So I was born in New Hampshire, in the U.S. Even though I've never I've been once there. I was going skiing with a friend from Boston to Vermont, and we stopped in Manchester, New Hampshire, which is where I was born. That was the only real
Interesting. Why?
notable
Why? Why?
notable.
Why were you born in Manchester, New Hampshire? What was the?
Uh, my
What was your
parents
mom's
lived there.
maiden name and your social
Yes,
security also,
give
please?
us the Social
Yes,
Security and the
exactly.
bank.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Or the first, my first pet's name. Uh, yeah. So, well, long story short, my parents lived there,
Got it.
and yeah, they just lived there not for long. And I was always jealous of my brother, who was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is a much more notable place or town compared to me, Manchester, where when you're in France, every time, and it happened to me again now in France on your ID, it doesn't even show the country, just show the city you were born. And many times, like it happened multiple times when people give me paperwork to sign and they put Manchester, United, UK, the UK, and I have to fill out the words. So Manchester is always confusing to people. And I guess that'd be the main downside of being born in New Hampshire, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, so no interesting story about me and New Hampshire, except that when the Patriots were really good, I could kind of claim they were my team, even though the Pittsburgh, where my dad is from, the Steelers are also very good. So that's my only positive I could say about this. When I started working in the industry, it was in 2003, so more than 20 years ago, when I really did not know much about anything, to be honest with you. And where I feel I was very blessed to start in that company that was American. It helped that I had U.S. citizenship and made a lot of things easy. But at the end of the day, it was in France. And I worked there at the same time that I was going to university. And that influenced me a lot. And I was studying computer science. So software engineering, that was the thing I was studying back then. Coding on computers when I was 10 and things like that, like a lot of the very common story. And yeah, that was a very interesting moment. And I always think that was one of the first time when I realized, going to computer school where I had really good grades, working for an American company. And as you know, compared to French people, Americans tend to be very, they don't restrain for compliments or using superlative and adjectives when the job is good and things like that, which as a French person,
Amazing.
it's like you really feel like, oh my god, this is like, oh my, really. But that was like a turning point, I think, in my career, in not in my career because I had just started, but in my life, where I felt valued for work. It motivated me to work really, really a lot. And I think, looking back, I think that was a time when I started developing an identity. Work and being good at work was my identity. I think if I had to pick like a ground zero of me being really, really into work, that would be that time. And over the years that followed, I learned a lot, worked a lot,
Well,
and that was good. And go ahead.
no, I just want to be sure we're going to fast forward towards also,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
the whole
yeah, yeah.
startup story, because
So
after that we want to go on the other side.
yeah,
But to
so
summarize, so French roots kind of always come back to the US at one point somehow, started through luck and whatever's daughter bust, like, to work in that field. And, and then from there you worked a couple of years, and then one day you were like, well, fuck it, I'm going to launch my startup. Like, what was the process?
exactly.
And I know what happened after, but it's fun.
Yeah, yeah. So just to highlight on the important inflection points, worked for that company for a while. I think realized at some point that I wanted to, do more stuff, go to places that were a little bit more ambitious, and ended up moving eventually to Texas. All
That
the
was
stuff from before I lived in France.
Texas from France.
10 years, or sorry.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So back in
France to
2012,
Texas.
I moved to Texas. France to Texas back in 2012 to work for a big financial organization, a big European bank that had an operation in Texas that was doing commodity trading around energy, most likely. And I got hired there, and I think that was like, really, I call it like moving to Texas to pursue the American dream. That thing where I'm good at work. And I always felt that if you're good at work, and I say this in a cynical way, but I think that's a good descriptor. Being good at work, you want to go to America. America is a place when you're good at work. That's the best place to be, in my opinion. Business is the true religion of America. It's not football. It's not religion.
Capitalism.
More traditional. It is the true religion. The true national sport is business and capitalism.
We're like France is capitalism and Catholicism and socialism, or it's socialism. Excuse me, it's socialism and Catholicism.
Yeah.
I got it backwards. So,
yes, France is a different place.
France religion is strikes. We love striking. It's our.
And there wasn't like a huge culture shock. There wasn't a huge culture shock for you because you're already working for an American company, but in France, right? So this was just, or.
There was a big cultural shock because I used to work for a very small company. And when I joined that big bank, I was working for a big organization, huge bank. And that's when I realized how big organization works. And I'm in the interest of saving time, I'm not going to go and start doing a laundry list of everything that just goes wrong in big company. And as I'm sure you know, and more importantly,
that's Frank's other podcast. Yeah, it's called the Reformed Corporate and Startup Now, guys.
the boring middle.
Yeah, but it's interesting how it was pretty obvious that this was not a place for me. And not necessarily the topic, which was, doing, leveraging software to do analysis, to do investments, which I thought was a very interesting subject, but it's just the environment, the vibe, the people, it was just not a place for me. And thankfully, I would say that was back in 2012, a lot of European banks, this was when Dodd-Frank was signed into law. And they basically decided, you know what, and that was post a great financial crisis, and a lot of European bank that was involved in trading just decided, hey, we don't want to be involved in that anymore. So they pretty much did a very, pretty much laid off 80% of the people and closed the office a little bit later. And that was actually kind of a blessing to me. And that led me to the next opportunity. Did it feel like a blessing
at the time?
It felt like a big relief to me. It did feel like a big relief to me because it was just pretty clear it was not a place for me. And I think I'd really set up myself to stay at least 1 year. And I'm sure I'd signed paperwork that said that if I left before a year, I had to pay back my signing bonus and relocation pack. There was some kind of a symbolic thing that I had about the 1 year. I'm pretty sure nothing would have happened if I had left before a year. But I'd set myself to not leave before 1 year. And I got laid off maybe 8 months in, so I actually was relieved. I was relieved. And it was interesting to just, they give you a packet with all and they give you this 5 stage of grief, so that when you're home and you're really bothered about it, they give you all kind of mental counseling and thing. And it was not funny because for me it was well, I'm actually pretty happy. I'm getting severance. I'm getting this. This is actually, It was interesting for me. It was interesting. And then I was pretty excited about my next steps at the time, even though I didn't know what it was going to be, but I was excited. And that next step turns out working for a hedge fund that was doing similar thing. And it was a small company. And that was a very interesting experience in a lot of ways because once again, I think it was recognized that I was good at work. But at the same time, I was also very I had a very hard time with authority, with being told, to do things because X is the boss or because X said so, which I believe is a classic trait of entrepreneurs is having a hard time with authority.
But was that something? Was that something that you just felt then when you were sort of fed up with the previous career, or you were always having these problems with authority?
No, always.
But you ever thought of going taking some other path, or the entrepreneurial journey, or because it seems like you spend a lot of time in corporate environment?
Yeah, well, I think there was always in the back of my mind this idea, someday I'm going to start my own company. I think there was always in the back of my mind. I think I would not say that I was always thinking that I could not have a boss, but there was a few moments actually in my career, even early on, where I kind of disobeyed what my order were, and it turned out to work great, to be like the right thing to do, and it turned out commercially to be great for the business and things like this. And it happened a few times, and I think that kind of made me realize, hey, you know what? Maybe because X said so is not necessarily
more
the reason why
credibility.
you should do something. And I think it took a while, but after some time, it became pretty obvious that. And you know, one thing I would think is I was a software engineer working as call it a market analyst and a trader down the line, and you know, software engineer in America, at least, you know, in 2015, 2016, you can make a pretty good amount of money. And I always thought, you know, worst case, if things don't work out, I always can go back to become a software engineer. And you know, that gave me the confidence not to settle, pretty much, to think like, you know, I can push things. And if things don't work out, you know, worst case, I can always get a job as a software engineer.
So
And yeah.
I know you don't like to do what you're being told and that you would push back. But I really want to accelerate towards, you know, like when you launch your company. And I'm also now I'm curious to know if
let's get into the meat. Let's get into the meat.
Yeah.
Sorry, and I also curious to know if when you give orders, people follow them. But let's zoom on that, and then after that, this way we'll have like maybe 15 minutes to talk about your messy middle. But this is like
yeah. So I mean, we're right there anyway. So you know, back in 2016, my wife was pregnant, and I suspect it messed up with my brain, and it kind of triggered me to basically say, you know what, I want to change job. I want to do something else at the same time, you know. And that's around that time that I quit the hedge fund, where things were rocky. The result were good, but I could tell the vibe and the atmosphere. You know, a lot of mercenary people work in finance, and that is not really what I like. I love, you know, the process of doing things, and working with the end justify the means kind of people is not is I respect it because that's what makes that industry works. That's just the way it works. But I felt was not something that was for me. Obviously, years later when I built my business, I realized that sometimes the end justify the means. But you have to worry about the result rather than just the process. But basically, back in 2016, I started my company, and the reasoning at the time was, you know, I always wanted to do it. I don't think this was the right time, but I thought that was the time to do it nevertheless, and that I could do a better job than the established vendors in the space, in the niche that I was targeting. And I thought that could work. And worst case, I could always go back to become a software engineer, or frankly, going back to even the places that worked before. You know, I always had good relationship, and I always felt, you know, worst case, you know, it would not be the end of the world. So I started the company, and I think for a few years, for first year, I think it was a lot of you know, geeking out on some stuff and not really worrying about the bottom line, which I feel as an engineer, you know, yeah.
Did
So
you raise
I did not raise any money. I bootstrapped the whole thing all the way to the end. Thankfully, I had some funds on the side. And one of the great things about being a software engineer is that you could actually build your MVP yourself, and things like that. I also brought French interns to the US that were pretty hardworking, and we're not. I'm sorry, maybe I'm going to sound like an old person, but not as entitled as American, you know, computer grads that just, you know, it's, oh, I want to go to Google or Facebook. You know, I'm a small business like this. There's no way I'm going to attract some kids. So I did bring a few French kiddos, I call them, to work with me at the beginning. And after about a year, and I'd say a year, we started, thanks to some friends that were in the industry, to sign some deals, to sign some licenses and get some money in. It was a very niche product. So it was not like you know, like $29.99 a month, you know, per user, and then you got to get thousands of users. It was a much more expensive solution that was targeting people that were doing investments. So pretty expensive stuff. So if you could sell a few seats, it was good enough to get you in business, pretty much. And so, we got some money coming in, hired more people, developed more features, more add-ons, more part of the sub products, sold more, hired more people, and that was kind of the cycle. And I don't think I was ever trying to build a lifestyle business. I think since the beginning I had this idea that I was trying to build a business to basically build equity effectively, to capitalize on some equity, and not paying myself any real salary and things like that. And with the idea of getting an exit down the road, I think that was kind of the psychological. I think that's what we expect when you bathe in the startup ecosystem. Like the definition of a success is an exit, and now with. And
I kind of like it, by the way, because usually people are like, I had this passion and I was like trying to accomplish this mission, and you're like on day one, you're like, just want to gather equity and like make it to decent exit. It's not something you hear,
which is funny because I loved it, but I think I'm also I like games. I like systems and play, and I'm a very big competitive player. And I just assume without even questioning it, which is curious, but that growing the business, growing the equity, and exiting that's the way the game is played. The first company I worked on also was a lifestyle business for the founder, and that kind of frustrated me that we let a lot of opportunities on the table. Obviously now I have much more appreciation for what he was doing at the time, which is kind of the whole that we'll talk later. But that was kind of the basic mindset at the time. That's what we set to do. Thankfully, in 2021. Okay, well, so there was also a very important development back in 2009, end of 18. We got hit by a lawsuit by my former employer that accused me of IP theft, and that was a obviously a very painful and costly and draining experience, which I really wish nobody would have to go through that. Yeah. And we actually went all the way to
frame it like that wasn't a detail, like it wasn't like a tiny suit, it was life threatening for your company, right? So
yes,
it was basically we need to shut down and we need to owe you a bunch of millions of dollars kind of lawsuit.
Exactly. Right? They were trying to shut us down pretty much. And it
did it come as a surprise that is that something that was even merely on your mind, or just like came out of nowhere? Actually, how did you get the news? Or just like waking up one day, you open your email, or like your life collapsed?
Yes. Don't you have to get served?
No,
was it a guy like,
usually
hi,
the lawyer sends you an email.
Are you Sylvain?
No, it's true. They say, yeah.
A lawyer sends you an email. Yeah.
Where did they serve you guys?
They served it at home. At my wife got the processor, but we knew it was coming. We knew
okay,
at
so
the
you
time
knew.
Because,
you knew. Okay,
no,
yeah.
It was a lengthy process between the first threats to the lawsuit happening. I mean, it's a very long process. I mean, I think all in all, it took almost 2 years. I think the whole process took 2 years, all the way to trial and post-trial settlement. And
but suddenly, like in your mind, when that happened, like is like suddenly you can't really focus on your business because you have to run both operations, your customer, your growth. Like what was the brain percentage allocated for dealing with lawsuit versus dealing with life versus dealing with everything?
I think that's the moment my brain turned to, there's peacetime general and wartime general. I switched to wartime. I switched to all my energies goes into adrenaline used to fuel me to fight this. And I think we'll never know what's the counterfactual is. If there was no lawsuit, what would happen? But I think it created a lot of urgency in our company to sign as many deals as possible, be very resourceful, and always assuming that, someday maybe or customer is going to freak out that we have a lawsuit. They're going to stop paying us, or they're going to start using our software, and then we're going to be out of money and we're going to die, And so there was always these threats, this Damocles sword hanging over our head. That was really draining, but also.
I want to go back to what you said before, because your state of mind could have been like, well, I knew that I could always go back and become a developer again. So you kind of closed the door. It wasn't like, we tried, let's go.
I could go back to become a software engineer, just not at that place. Just not at that place.
Yeah, you already burnt that bridge, or they burnt it for you. So.
Right. And also the hard part when you.
No, but what I mean is you didn't give up. Like your initial state of mind was like, if it doesn't work, I give up. Like something was like, fight or flee, and you went for fight.
I think deep down, I was convinced that this thing would never go to trial, that this was a misunderstanding, and that we would come to a reasonable agreement to end this. And I think it was only until the day before that we actually went to trial, not court for hearing, trial, jury trial. It was the day before. The judge asked for a last minute mediation. And that's during that mediation, I realized, shit, we're actually going to trial. And I think up until that point, I was completely delusional, but I was always thinking, we'll come to an agreement. This can't be, maybe call it denial, maybe call it not understanding the other party, what have you. But I think I was always in the state of mind that this is going to get resolved. They're going to come to their senses. And also another thing is, during all the mediation and all the discussion we had, they never ever came with some kind of reasonable exit for me, like a reasonable agreement that we could come up with. Many times it was like pretty much equivalent to just shut down your business.
What
was the choice? There was no choice.
And while all of that was happening, like what was the impact on, I guess, again, your startup life, sure, but also your personal life, right? It has to be.
I think for the personal life, it was brutal because it was, being a wartime general means there's no place for, to relax at home. Whether it would have made a big difference or not to relax at home is a different debate, but it just did not happen. I think I was just very stressed. The impact on the business, like I said, was helping us to focus. And when you're a startup founder, the CEO, everybody looks up to you. And as some of you know, even though things, you're going to run out of money, you got to put a good show for your employees. You got to inspire confidence because they get it. So, it was important that I would not freak out in public, or that, I would remain upbeat. And honestly, the only way I could do that is to convince even myself that it's going to be fine. This thing's going to get resolved. I'm not one of those, I don't do positive assertions in front of the mirror or anything like this. But I think that frankly, I don't think there was any other, besides like completely giving up. I don't think there was any other path that would have taken. And, it was obvious, I guess. It was obvious that this is what I'm going to operate. This is how I'm going to operate. I didn't think about it too much, to be honest with you.
So fast forward, you've got, you've have this existential crisis moment at the company. There's a settlement, I'm assuming, or does it go to trial and there's a jury? And so give us a sentence on the on the outcome, and then let's get to the point of, would love to know like where decide to sell and the decision point there. So 2-pointer.
Yeah. So basically, we actually went to trial in front of the jury. It was not a cleanup. I mean, I could go on and on about this, but in the interest of time, we won't go in there.
No,
exactly.
But crazy.
It is.
I've only settled. I've never done the full trial. Right. I've only settled in this situation.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's 98% of lawsuits end up in settlements. They don't go to trial. So that's also why I was telling you, I just assumed it would never go to trial. But We went to trial, which was funny. I mean, not funny, but it happened literally in February 2020. It was literally before the whole COVID things happened. And at the time, I was like, man, I wish we had more time to prepare the trial. I'm so grateful that it happened before, because when COVID happened, all the court stopped doing any trial for I don't know how long. Like it would have delayed everything. So I was really grateful to literally on the eve of COVID lockdown in the US to almost wrap that thing up. But the outcome was mixed, as in it's not like it was like 10-0 for us, but for us the most important part was we did not got asked to shut down the business. It did cost us some amount of money, but we survived, which was really the important part for us. Eventually, we settled post-trial to not go into appeal. I think everybody was just tired. They were tired. Everybody was tired of this, so we just settled. And then came this moment post-trial after 2 years of fight, of war, of drainage of energy, which was like, okay, now we have free, now we can run the business as we would love and all this kind of thing. COVID happened, as you know, in the US, everybody worked from home. I'm not a big remote person at all. I really did not like this. I get a lot of energy from working in person with people, getting hyped, solving problems together. That's just the way I am. And I think I was really drained from the lawsuit. And I started working with a good friend of mine who's been an advisor to a lot of companies, was doing corporate strategy at some big company to buy other companies. So he had experience with the whole, what should you do with a startup? And he analyzed our company or accounts and everything and said, the company is doing really good. And he started telling me, this is in early 2021, the market is really, really hot right now. There could be a recession coming later down that year. And even though your sales, he literally told me that you could double your sale, and maybe next year when you sell, you're going to sell for the same price. And that made a big impression on me, because I really start picturing me being drained again for another few years and thinking the market could cool off and the M&A market would cool off, and cooling off for n number of years. And I told myself, you know what, I'm really tired.
Which by the way, it did. So good timing.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. And which is, good timing. Yes. But eventually, I think at the time I was not really exactly ready to sell the business, but, we thought, I had some big corporates that were interested. We had people coming in to, even when we still had the lawsuit, that were interested into maybe joining their team. And we started reopening the discussion just to see, what would be an LOI, what would be just looking at the menu kind of thing. And the more I went down this process, the more I realized, maybe that would be a good idea to get acquired by a strategic. So in this case, we were talking mostly with one strategic and then a second strategic, which was a competitor to the other. And I think I got convinced during the process this was the right time to sell, that I was drained and tired, and this was fine. And this was fine to sell. And back in May 2021, the acquisition happened.
You cannot disclose, I guess, much stuff. Whatever you can disclose, that would be helpful as a pointer. But at least, how big was your team?
So we were about 15 people.
Nice.
We were very engineering focused. So most of us were engineers. We had a very small, 2 or 3 person that were working around sales and customer success and things like this. But most of the organization were engineers. So we were very, very engineer focused. And that was kind of something I was proud about, that we were an engineering first company. So yes, we're about 15.
So, okay. So again, acquisition happened, everything went well. We'll skip on the earn out because it's always messy and we all know it sucks. And then after that, I kind of want to zoom back to, what happened, I guess, on the personal level, what happened, after and kind of where you are now, because now you're really in the midst of it all again. And back to the origin of the story, because I know we talked before between what you thought would happen when you achieve these goals that many entrepreneurs dreams of, and then kind of zooming into where you are now. And maybe Teddy and Gabriel wants to add other questions to that, but
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say, I think I was happy, and going through due diligence is also a very tiring exercise, especially we were a very lean organization. I was the business guy as well. I was the guy who kept a lot of the records. I was the guy who kept everything tidy, and I was the main person doing a lot of the due diligence. And that was also a pretty draining process for me. And I remember waiting on the last day when we had finally, the way it works is that you sign a stock purchase agreement. And eventually when the money hits the bank accounts, then that's when the actual consideration has been paid. And then that's when the deal has actually happened. And I was literally laying in bed, just waiting. And I was just tired. I literally was just laying in bed tired, almost like,
just hitting refresh.
Trying to sleep. Not exactly. I knew it was going to happen, but I was like, I'm tired. I just want to sleep. I'm just exhausted. And that was pretty awesome for a few weeks. And I think one very hard part for me post-acquisition was how the cultural shock things were going to be in the new company, in the acquisition company. Going from entire authority to controlling everything to having very strong opinions about things that are kind of counter to a lot of I call it like standard business procedures and things like this, especially in software engineering, especially in technology and software engineering. I got hit right in the face with the back to reality of what those big companies are,
And
again, let's. Sorry, go on, Gabriel.
So okay, so you sell, the money hits the bank account. I guess you're sitting in bed, and now you're in the corporate in bed with them. Do you decide to leave the company? Is that the next? I mean, like, I want to fast forward a little because because we want to get into sort of this messy middle period. Like, do you feel out of the game? You discussed your first company was an experience, a lifestyle business. Like, you're in this.
Yeah, I'm not gonna let Sylvain answer because it's gonna take too long, and also he's not gonna remember correctly. But I do remember because I met him at that time. And what was awesome is the discussion we had.
We met 6 months in.
The discussion we had was like, I'm going to live, and you were like leaving like, a lot of zeros on the table, but that's how painful it was.
Yes.
You're like, I'm done, I don't care.
I'd gained 20 pounds in 6 months. Like this 6 months post-acquisition was just a very, very traumatizing time somehow, even though there was no, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, we need to make episodes about, earnouts and the absorption, because I think corporations could do such a better job. And I know we talked about it that time. But it suffered, it sucks, fast forward, you went through it, you survived it, and then you get out of it. Like, so what happened after this whole place?
And how long did you stay?
Yeah. So, and it's important for me to say, the people that acquired us were good people. They did their best. I think that was the best place the best company that could have bought us. But at the end of the day, sometimes there's just, transplant rejection. And I think this is what happened. It was just incompatible as far, the antibodies of the corporation are just rejecting me.
Yeah.
And it's not
their fault.
Good or bad.
It's the statistics
exactly,
is 90%.
That's the way it works.
Like, it's 90%. It's the process fails for many corporations. Yeah.
And just to be clear, our acquisition was a great success. The company, our business unit continued growing, and it's a poster child of a great acquisition internally. So, I stayed about 2.5 years there. I had a retainer. I basically was strongly incentivized to stay 2 years. And after 2 years, that's when I basically moved back to France. There's some messy details about this, but I moved back to France. And I think back when I was back in France, I didn't want to change too many things at the same time. And I stayed for another 6 months, so that's something along those lines.
So So now we can zoom in the messy middle. I guess the worst questions people usually ask is what's next, and we're not asking that question because we know next implies clarity. So I guess is what's your messiness? What's messy right now? Like what's your
the messiness comes from, for me, has come from the realization that I believed in some marriage. I was believing in illusions. I had thoughts and beliefs that proved to be wrong, where I realized I opened the door and I
which
realized,
one?
I was wrong.
Go into it. What was your beliefs that were wrong?
One was, if you're good at business, if you're good at work, this solves all your problems. You work really hard, you do an exit that is a commercial, that is a success, and everything else in your life, personal relationship or family, how you feel in your body, everything just becomes bliss if you're good at this. If the scoreboard looks good, that's how you're gonna be happy. You're gonna be happy. And I know it's funny because obviously I knew this was not true because all those things abound in that. Everybody say that, but I always thought, well, they don't know. They're not me. Me, I'm different. For me, it's gonna work. I literally, that's the way I thought, which I think is a very common way with entrepreneur. Like you tend not to just take at face value what people say. You tend to be an independent thinker. That's the way I am, at least. And turns out, hey, everybody was right. Turns out I'm not that special, by the way. I'm just all those testimonies about people who've been there, done that. Turns out they were right. And that's this realization that I was just, I was wrong. I was wrong about a lot of this. And when the belief that you've had for 20 plus years, you realize sure thing, they've served me very well. They've served me, I'm really, by all measure, I'm very happy about my business achievements. And I think those beliefs were big drivers in achieving those results. But also realize that this was only giving you one part of the equations. The idea is that all you need to worry about is what's on the scoreboard, and everything just flow from that is a very flawed idea, and it took me a long time to figure it out. I got divorced from my wife, about a year ago. It's obviously all related somehow, and yeah, it's way more complicated than just having points on the scoreboard. That's my big realization, I would say. And bear in mind, it worked out. It worked out for me. That's the crazy part, which is I feel like, well, what if the lawsuit came out like a very adverse outcome had happened at the lawsuit, So yeah, a very weird thing, very weird feelings, I would say.
So you went from 2003, the lifestyle business in France, working as an engineer, to coming to the States and working at a more corporate company, spending 13 years working, 2003 to 2016, a corporate company in the States, to a hedge fund, to then running a bootstrap startup, which of course you exited and succeeding. What are you doing now that you would do maybe differently than prior to doing this startup? What are you thinking about, and how does it change your mind knowing, what you know now versus what you didn't know then?
Yeah, so even though I left the big the acquiring company, officially like 2 months ago, it had been a long, many months since I was really not involved in the day-to-day, and I was pretty detached. So it's been almost 2 years now that I haven't been like, getting this energy of starting a new project and getting the thrill of it, which I love. And obviously, I want to get back. I'm not one of those. Sorry to pick on Florida because I know Gabriel, you're in Florida, but I picture like some people, they really like, oh, I'm just gonna move to Florida and buy a boat and or buy a bar or both and go fishing and play golf. That's just not the way I am. And so I know I'm gonna go back to do something. I'm obviously petrified about repeating the same mistakes. However, that's why I'm taking the time right now about figuring it out. What are the attributes? What are the properties that I really loved about the work before? Can I untangle them from the stuff that I didn't like, or the thing that led to, things that I wished had not happened, And I think taking time, even though it's pretty hard to wake up and then there's really not much to do at the end of the day. You don't have this email and you get into, killing it mode. I think that's where I am right now. We're just taking the time to really figure out deep down what I want to do. And what I want to do is not necessarily, I want to work in that industry or this or that. It's really how. Going back to that lifestyle business, where I was very critical of the first company where I worked at, and they have been in business for 30 plus years. I think this is, at the end of the day, what I have in mind is not trying to do this thing where, I'm just trying to give it all and I'm going to cash out in the next, 2 to 5 years. I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to be into that mode where, this is just temporary and we're going to cash out. I want to build something where I'm happy to wake up in the morning. I'm happy of the interaction I have with people. I'm proud of what I'm doing. And I'm not trying to, and there's no end date in sight. There's no end date in sight. And I think for me, that was, I like to say how building the business was year 1, famine, year 2, famine, year 3, famine, year 5, famine, year 6, feast. I don't want to have one of those negative, and then one big payout. I don't want to do that ever again. Not that I want to make a lot of money or anything, but I don't want to have this thing where you're putting it all for a hypothetical big outcome that you're going to have years down the road. I want something sustainable where the benefits and the enjoyments happen every single day, not grinding it for years to finally get a hypothetical positive, major positive.
Yeah, so you've got years of famine. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 of feast. Do you think you kind of have to do it first that way to then be in the position that you are today to actually succeed?
No, I don't think you have to do that. I think, and I asked myself many times, all those time when on the weekend I would go to the office, did it really make a difference to go to the office, every Saturday? I don't think so. I really don't think so that it made a difference. But I don't know I know Frank is really big on knowing popular cartoons and things like that. And I don't know who said that, but many times the first company, you're just really overcompensating for your lack of experience by just putting in a lot of hours. And I think eventually once you have a lot of experience, you really realize that, it's all about 80-20 or massive, a few things really matters. And that's one of my big takeaway from starting a business. I think in the end, a very few number of things really matters, and a lot of things really didn't matter. We're just changing things plus or minus 5%, pretty much. And really, when you have experience, that's how I picture people that have experience that do, because I don't think I have. But it's all about being okay, letting go of all those things that are just very, marginal, and focusing on the key thing that are the most important. And unfortunately, and I've seen this a lot with first-time founders, you just overcompensate for your uncomfort, for your inexperience by just trying to, I call it, spray and pray kind of things. You try to tackle everything and you try to compensate on everything. I think it's not necessary at all. Being focused and being smart, I think, can go a long way.
I've got tons of questions, but I want to be sure Teddy gets to ask one, because it must have been thinking a lot.
Yeah, this is really great. I could listen to you for, 3-4 more hours, and I really want to hear a lot of other details in between. It's really like a journey. What a journey. I mean, 5 years roughly, or 7 years, out of which you spent 2 in this lawsuit, and then 2 more in the acquirer, and those two were sort of like challenges and miserable to some point that led you to leave the company? I don't know. I would love to also talk to you in like a year once you figure out what you're going to do next and see how you're going to handle this phase in between. But I don't know. Congrats on everything you achieved so far. It's an amazing story.
Only in America.
I don't have questions.
But that's what I always say. I mean, only in America. Only in America.
To me, there's no. I mean, to me, there's one or two things you didn't mention, which I kind of try also to think about the patterns. We see one patterns I've seen, I guess, is some people end up working with wood. Barak was mentioning some guy who was a billionaire ended up teaching math, and I know that right now you're learning about electricity and building homes.
Yeah. So
say a few words about that. It's kind of a.
Yeah, so I did recently buy a house, a summer house, a summer vacation house, and it's kind of a house from the 50s, and there's a lot of things to to change and to remodel, and I actually do spend a lot of time there and try to learn to change some electrical switches or change some, I don't know, all kind of systems, like handyman's job kind of things. And it's funny how I always love to do those things, but when I was in the crazy, the fog of war of running a business, anything, like your toilet is clogged or you need to change something in your house, it's just a net negative. It's a pure negative that just drags you down. It's just a major inconvenience. You want to solve it. You just want to pay someone to do it. If I go and do it, I'm not going to have the patience to use the right tool. I'm going to botch it. It's going to make me even more annoyed. And I found with all the space that I have here now, the mental space and the free time that I have on my hand, just this ability to just okay, I want to do this. For instance, there's this piece of furniture I bought at the market, down the street, and it's kind of not in a great shape. Thankfully, ChatGPT can tell me the steps that I need to do. What material do I need to buy? And I ask him about the different type of varnish. The pros and cons.
Can you drag it to the camera? Can we see how you butchered it? Or...
No. Unfortunately, it's downstairs. So I can't.
I'll put it on the cover of a YouTube video. Yeah.
But that's one of the small projects where I find comfort in just looking at the. Getting myself familiar with the different types. And I'm an engineer. I'm a curious person. I like to learn stuff. And at the end of the day, it's a very satisfying thing just to do something physical. Also, this is also about software engineers having a complex about hardware and real things. Like we think this is real, where software is all like virtual and things. So there's this. I look up to real thing. I like a real thing. I like to do real thing. But yeah, this is one of those things where I like to do.
I think we're hitting the end of the interview, but it's out of the blue, so it's okay if you don't have any. But do you have any quotes that kind of comes to mind right now that you like? Anything that comes?
No, not really.
All right. Any books you recommend? Anything that helps you in dark times? TV shows? Nothing?
I think a lot of those books are just fuel for the hustle culture, in my opinion.
I was thinking about novels. I mean, it could be you can read normal books.
I never really read fiction, which goes on to say how I was always obsessed with it has to be nonfiction so that I can learn things and use them, and I don't do fiction somehow, and I think that says a lot. That says a lot.
So no quotes, no reading.
I'm not proud of it. Yeah, I mean I have some readings. It's all about right now more happiness. Trying to figure it out. That's what I'm reading right now. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Arthur Brooks. The Harvard professor who does the happiness, science of happiness class. Even though he's been on multiple podcasts, I actually like listening to him on different podcasts. I actually like that because there's slightly different things. But yeah, so this would be one thing that's highly influential on me those days.
Arthur Brooks. I think the quote So we're going to have at least a quote here. I'm butchering it definitely a little bit, but his quotes usually stem around this idea that commitments are kind of what lead to happiness. It's really commitments in relationships, but I think all of us can agree committing to things and focusing actually kind of leads to happiness because it allows us to close off sort of the uncertainties.
Yep. Sure thing.
Merci, Sylvain.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, yeah. Oh,
Thank you.
yeah. And I'm a pretty passionate person, so that's why any topic I can go full stack all the way down 4 hours. So sorry about this. Thanks for the reframing
awesome.
once in a while.
Thanks,
Great.
everyone.
All right,
Bye.
guys.